This is a sideways kamikaze episode of Building a Bridge to Belonging because driving down here to do my podcasts, I got the news from a dear, dear friend, Lamo, that Sinead O'Connor had passed. And there's the lump in my throat and my heart because in terms of helping myself belong to me, Sinead O'Connor's music was instrumental in the role model that I desperately so needed as a young woman because I carried rage. And I carried rage for the injustice that I constantly witnessed on my planet as I grew up. I was raised at a Catholic school and the hypocrisy started there. The witnessed hypocrisy started there. I was bullied by nuns. I was being taught that Jesus was, the peace, love and mung beans due to the world. And yet those who represented the word of Christ were liars. It was really that simple. So growing up 14, 15, 16, coming into 21, I was largely at war with the world. The rules that do as I do, not as I say, were very apparent to me. And then Sinead O'Connor hit with the righteous rage. Of course, probably everybody knows Nothing Compares to You, but the other songs that were hers in the background. Black Boys on Mopeds was probably the one that tore my heart open. It starts, Margaret Thatcher on TV, shocked by the deaths that took place in Beijing. It seems strange that she should be offended. The same orders are given by her. There it is. How can any leader of the free world be pointing the finger at what's happening in other people's countries while they're doing exactly the same? Psych 101, the nature of projections. And then there was another moment. I was left at home Saturday mornings to clean the house, and it's when I would put on the radio and I would just dance. So dance is one of my first languages. And a film clip came on and everybody was hoo-haing and booing Sinead O'Connor because she dared to break the story of the church abuse in Ireland of children. And the shock that went through the world for the first whistleblowers and their experience of the abuse was extraordinary. And she was on stage with Chris Christopherson at a concert, and she walked out to do her song and the crowd booed her. And I mean, they booed her for minutes and minutes and minutes. And the musicians in her band started to try to do the song that she was meant to sing, and she softened them, and she stood there, and she was present to this booing and the hatred that was coming at her because she dared to speak as a woman about the abuse of children that happened in Ireland. And when the booing finally quietened down, this diminutive woman with this voice sang this song about the reasons for war on this planet. And essentially it's like, while anyone is oppressed and while anyone is put down, there will be war because people will fight for what they inherently know is their birthright. And if you don't know that film clip, Google it, Chris Christopherson, Sinead O'Connor. And in that moment, she crafted a woman who refused to be afraid to speak. So her death to me is it's quite heartfelt. You can see that. And then she continued to speak and continued to outrage and continued to polarize people. And I, in my own world, experience that quite a lot. People either love me or are completely intimidated by me. But my heart is so big that their intimidation of me is included in my world because I know that I offend people and I don't mean to. It's just that I have a willingness to speak what I think with good manners and politeness. I mean, there's no excuse for not being polite and in offering absolute unconditional positive regard to people. But they don't have to agree with me and I do not have to agree with them. So that kind of brings me up to the last time Sinead O'Connor popped into my world. It was I'd just been sacked from my job for serious misconduct, for not wanting to follow a public health directive. And I woke up because I feel like a pressure hit the end of my bed, like somebody sits down. And in the first instance, it was Joan of Arc. And she looked at me and she said, "Do you think I didn't know I was going to die? Do you think I didn't know?" And how I internalized and made sense of that was, every moment where you challenge authority is a little death. The little one inside of you that wants to be mainstream, wants to fit in, wants to be loved, wants to be cared for, has to strip off an armour and go, well, I stand here by myself. And 4 days later, Sinead O'Connor sat on my bed and said, they hated me, they will hate you. And the hatred and the scorn that came from people who wanted to not take the vaccination for whatever reason was appalling. And I was forewarned, and forewarned is forearmed. So I was aware of the threats and the bullying and the crisis that would come to those of us who wanted to stay sovereign. And we weren't selfish, and we weren't stupid, and we weren't mean, and we weren't horrible. We just had stories of sovereignty and stories of personal authority that meant more than the propaganda and the bullying that we were being offered. So Sinead O'Connor, VALE, her passion, and it's funny, she was so brave. She ended up becoming Muslim. And in listening to her words, she found that in Islam, the one true religion, but that's how controversial she was. And then, of course, she got hammered for wearing the hijab and having for that opinion. And then a couple of weeks ago, her youngest child suicided, and the grief in her very last Instagram, the grief that she wore was extraordinary. So there's probably not much more to speak about Sinead, but that's my experience with, the way somebody can inspire a person, me, I'll own that. Sinead inspired me to not be afraid of the righteous rage and the passion I had for speaking up about injustice, particularly systemic injustice. Yeah, nothing compares to you, Sinead.